he swiped up because I promoted it on like a Instagram story, and he was like 4.5 hour podcast. Jesus Christ. I was like, yeah, that's how we do things around here.
Well, I have the two friends at work who listen to it, or at least start to listen to it. I mentioned I had a new one. Their first question is always, how long is it this time?
Yeah.
Living off borrowed time, the clock ticks faster. Living off borrowed time, the clock ticks faster. Living off borrowed time, the clock ticks faster. Living off borrowed time, the clock tick faster. Living off borrowed time, the clock tick faster. Living off borrowed time, the clock ticks faster. Living off borrowed time, the clock ticks faster. Living off borrowed time, the clock ticks faster.
It'd be
that's
like
why we're
that.
trying to do the mini episodes like this one. That's why we're trying to get this. And I mean, this is going to seem like, and this is probably not going to get us any new viewers or whatever, but I was talking about Sphinx that I had an idea for just like occasional content where we would go, because we were originally going to have this as an idea for an RYM list, but we're just going to do occasional mini episodes going over the Skaroofy list where we just go in like blocks of 10 about the albums he ranked and just discuss them. And I mean, it's actually like when you get to the actual content of the episodes and the albums we're discussing, it's not that niche, but discussing just a Skaroofy list. I'm probably pronouncing the guy's name fucking wrong, but I don't care because it's Skaroofy. I don't know. But just like that alone is like just going to turn like people are like, who the fuck is this Italian guy? And then if they look him up, they're gonna be like, why the fuck would I ever like listen to this? But the actual list itself is interesting. So it's like his favorite hip hop albums. It's like against being Skaroofy, it's like he has.
Yeah. Sphinx has talked about that list before.
Yeah, and like we were just basically going to go through it like in, I don't know if it's going to be like groups of 10 or like, I guess however many we could cover in like a reasonable hour and a half episode each time, depending on what we'd heard. Like, and the list is interesting too, because like the first 10, it's like, Public Enemy next to Dialect, next to like, I don't know, I can bring up the fucking PM with him, because I need to have that for the intro anyway. We were talking about it. The top 10 is, Public Enemy, Cloud Dead, Eric B. and Rakim, Dialect, 36 Chambers, Africa Bambaataa, Cannibal Ox, 3 Feet High and Rising, Cypress Hill, and Fugees. Like, that's an interesting episode right there. And there is stuff people know in there next to stuff people don't. So I think that would be like an interesting like, I mean, it'd just be like a periodic thing to do over time. Just like, again, like the movie episodes too. And it's just like shorter, like hour and a half content. Like we wouldn't obviously go like in depth with all the albums or anything. It's just like, why pick these and how do they stack up against each other? And like the first one, I guess we would introduce Skaroofy as for normal people who don't know who the fuck he is. So, and the idea of the list. And the first one might be longer, but otherwise it would be like maybe just occasional like hour-long episodes whenever he feels like doing.
Doesn't Sphinx have an RYM list or something about it?
We did, and then we made it private because we were going to work on it as a project. We might just make it public with like stuff based on the episodes now. But yeah, we originally had a list and then private. Maybe it's public now. I don't know. I have an editor on it, but I don't do anything because it was a project that like we just abandoned. But now this is our way of picking it up.
Right.
So
that makes sense.
So yeah. So the other thing, speaking of Sphinx, is what I wanted to cover in the intro. Is he just discovered the RYM Rough Guide. Good God, this is a treasure trove of cringy quotes. Well, I always knew about it, but just started reading those quotes, and I wanted to delete them.
Okay, well, at least he always knew about it.
True, but some of these quotes are, that's what I was going to lead off with. The other thing I was considering leading off with was I reviewed this recently. I mentioned it in the chat too. I really wish I knew of this for the year-end worst stuff, because I would have probably done this alongside COVID Santa. Was Van and Slow Hands. This is gotta stop.
Well, COVID Santa is
COVID
verified.
Santa's better, but this is like, dude, you got to see this fucking video where it's like, I guess Van Morrison's like kid graphic design is his possibly Van Morrison himself. They did like this like fucking Etch-a-Sketch YouTube video about like Galaxy Brain, about why COVID is not real and like the government's mean. And it's like, but it's like such like this mellow, smooth jazz, like the 80-year-old Van Morrison thing, but he's like trying to be all jolly angry. Like the chorus is like, this BS is going on long enough. It is the funniest shit. Man. Well, apparently Van Morrison
old people fucking suck.
Songs. Yeah, I fucking hate both of them. They're so hard, like so lame.
Old people fucking suck.
And slow hand. Like, God, I hate Eric Clapton. Like, and he's going to live to be 1,000. He's going to live to be a fucking 1,000. Like, why is Eric Clapton still putting out music?
Eric Clapton retired, bitch. Come on.
Eric Clapton one step away from just doing a like. How has Eric Clapton not done some sort of collaboration with Eminem at this point? It seems like that'd be like a Grammys prestige thing that should have happened. Like, I had a joke there about him being.
Oh yeah, actually, that I'm surprised that hasn't happened. Now that you bring that up, my ears are internally burning, screaming that this doesn't happen sometime.
Well, maybe when Eminem finally gets his Hall of Fame induction or whatever, they'll like have the legends, like they'll do a whole big rock crossover thing, because that's the only time they like to have like rap artists perform there, is when they can have guitars and Dave Grohl backing them up. So,
right. Absolutely. No question.
But anyway, so I guess to just roll into the intro here real quick. I mean, this episode is going to be about Earl, but I was plugging that we were going to be doing this episode in the Knowledge Fight server, because at the beginning of the episode, they're a podcast that does good intros, and one of the things they do in their intro is they ask each other what their bright spot is, which has started during the pandemic, when it's like we all need a bright spot. And the co-host of that always mentions, like he often mentions a hip hop album he's into, like. I remember him mentioning last year Vince Staples, Brockhampton. He also probably mentioned some good albums too. But and this one he mentioned the Earl album. So since he mentioned it on the show, I figured I was going to plug in the server, so I always plug the podcast over there, that I would be doing one on this. And somebody said, "Well, wow, that's cool. I wonder if you said it was reading the description." One of the users saying, "Well, I hope these RYM fans aren't like as pretentious as hip hop indie hip hop fans elsewhere." Would you say that RYM hip hop fans are pretentious?
RYM has hip hop fans? I didn't know.
Yeah. That's a Rough Guide, and friend of the show, frequent contributor Battered Sphinx, has made me alerted to this Rough Guide, which has some really good insights about hip hop that I hadn't really thought about. Like Tribe Called Quest. If you hate 50 Cent, just buy all their albums now. They're the complete opposite. Outkast. Instead of chronic bling, bitches, and hoes, they rapped about not using drugs, not having money, and real human relationships, without ever sounding soft or beating you over the head with the message. Really makes you think. It really makes you think. Most Def.
I'm deep in thought.
Two things differentiate Most Def from the vast majority of rappers. He's got something real to say, either directly or through the political and social undercurrents that underpin many of his tracks. Undercurrents and underpin in the same sentence. But importantly, he also knows how to say it. His easy, effortless, intelligent flow means that he never sounds forced or preachy, ultimately making his lyrics all the more powerful. They're very defensive about things not being preachy. Beastie Boys. Beastie Boys are probably the most successful practitioners. Beastie Boys are probably the most successful practitioners of the hip hop genre, doing more and more interesting things in the format than any of their contemporaries, becoming legends in the process with 4 nearly flawless early albums and one transcending the hip hop genre to become a popular music touchstone on a par with Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon. Also Beastie Boys. The Beastie Boys have defied 2 of hip-hop's greatest cliches, notoriously short shelf life and the general vilification of white boy rapper. Tupac. I love his honesty and the fact that even as a mainstream artist kept the political and social issues present. Of course, he also did stuff for the radio, and a lot of people don't like him for that. I don't like his thug side either, but that's okay. That was it. That was I think we need to
I have a question.
Ourselves as an RYM-based podcast in the description. I don't want people to get the wrong impression that if we have new listeners that, we're associated with it. Yeah. That's the RYM hip-hop community. That's who we represent. I can see why people think we're terrible people.
Yeah, I at first I was against that guy who called us terrible people, but now I can see where he's coming from. So
yeah, I was always actually with him. I agreed with him. I really agree with him.
Yeah, as we said, Joke's on him.
We clearly did not know the room when he was insulting us.
Yes.
And Sphinx supplemented this with the Rough Guide had the same energy as this T-shirt that he sent an image of, which I'll have Wyatt put up in the as a visual for this. It's a T-shirt that says "Rap." It's like in the style of what we written on a chalkboard in school, because we're about to be taken to school with some knowledge. Rap minus lies equals hip hop.
Yes.
Again,
my next college seminar, I'll be sure to have that one. My next open mic night, I'll be sure to keep that in mind. I'll bring the acoustic guitar with me. Those vibes will be better than that damn hip hop that those kids are listening to.
That damn mumble rap. Yeah.
Right. Gosh, it was over. I was told specifically.
We were told that mumble rap was dead. And they came back and they killed it again.
They killed it again. I was told that
they killed it.
We're supposed to listen to real music. That's what I. That's what I was told.
I love that Tupac one where it just ends. I don't like his thug side either, but that's okay. Like, good.
That's okay. Yes. 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 That is a sentence, and something that is a through line is that all bad RYM opinions on hip hop, of which there are too many to name, show up in comment boxes, and the comment box in question for the album we are discussing tonight is truly horrendous.
Yeah, you stole my transition from me, and we'll get to somebody who's very fond of talking about transitions. As much as I did not want to get to that guy, he's a big part of the reason why that comment box sucks. More specifically, the preoccupation with him. Yeah, this is going to be a discussion of the new Earl Sweatshirt album, "Sick." Spoiler alert! I think we're both. I'm not giving away too much by saying you're very fond of it. I'm incredibly fond of it. If you've seen my review,
yeah.
I fucking love this album. We're going to quickly defer to the intro from the Whole Lotta Red episode, because I think this is going to have a lot of similarities. I mean, sonically, I don't think it shares very much with it. I mean, maybe a little bit, but in terms of the hot take economy reaction to it, that everybody had to chime in, like, oh, you got your new Earl album, and it's underwhelming, just like everything he's done since X album. I'm sure some people would say the Earl EP has, been underwhelming. He's so overrated. Fuck you if you don't like this album. I think there are a lot of people who came into this with just fully formed negative opinions, wanting to shit on people's parades for enjoying it. I mean, I think there are people, if you are a fan of a certain style of the way Earl rapped in the past or what he rapped about, I mean, I would disagree with you. I think there are legitimate things that personal preferences that I could see you disliking this if you liked Earl as an artist in the past. I don't know if they're necessarily valid criticisms of what he's doing now, because I think it's more of the school of the artist isn't making the music I want them to make. But because I think for what this album aims to do, I think it does it perfectly. Those are not really the criticisms I'm seeing in like the comment box and stuff. And I haven't really read a whole lot of other takes on this. I haven't seen the Fantano review. I'm going to bitch about Fantano, but I haven't seen his review, nor do I intend on it. I just know the score. Again, more about the way RYM processes Fantano than anything about him himself. But it's just a lot of harping about one line that people are misinterpreting, which I'm sure our biggest fan is going to, I'm sure first of all, he misinterpreted it. And second of all, it's going to love our discussion about that. And just dumb. It's mostly about the fucking line, but just, I don't understand.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I didn't even notice that, like, the first listen or two, and then I was like, why is everyone so, okay, I guess I'll notice that line. But, like, that's not, picking up on that was, like, the furthest thing from my brain when listening to this otherwise wonderful album.
Right, when we get to that line, I'll say why it goes into my whole overarching thesis about the album, is why I think it's intended to be taken one way by dum-dums, so you think about something else. Like, I don't think that it is an anti-vaccine line. It's on track 4, Vision, which, again, if that's really all you take away from that track, you're missing a whole lot of good stuff about this album. Yeah. Although I am kind of glad that... I'm not going to say I'm ever glad that discussion comes up and stupid people are having that discussion, especially now. But, it was annoying enough when it happened around Palmolive with a line that absolutely was anti-vaccine in a time when we weren't in a pandemic. So now 10 times more annoying, 10 times more destructive to be having this tiresome fucking discussion. But I was honestly afraid people would just be shitting on Loopers. So I'm glad that people like,
yeah,
his appearance is not being as poorly taken as I thought it would, judging by sometimes Danny shows up on more mainstream stuff, like I talked about Detroit versus Everybody's comment box on YouTube, and yeah, I was really afraid that it was just going to be a whole lot of just negative reaction to him being weird or not technical rapping. Considering the only other features on here are Arm & Hammer, and obviously no one's going to criticize them unless you're already coming into it not a fan of theirs. Whereas I think a lot of Earl fans might not necessarily know the Loopers at this point.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, and I mean it also helps in this case that that track that had the Loopers on it is one of the best tracks on the record. So there's definitely a nice way that the Loopers fits on the record just from a sonic perspective. And I know we're probably going to go track by track, so I'll save my thoughts too much on that track. But I mean, that's a outstanding fucking song with an incredible beat, and like obviously the production matches up because we've had Black Noise produce many songs in this style and in this vein. So
yeah, it's definitely got a lot.
Like there's a familiarity aspect to it that like it sounds like it doesn't just sound like a beat that the Loopers would be very comfortable over, but it's like the way that each of them are rapping, the way that the Loopers comes in rapping is so different from what's come before, and so it feels really fresh and exciting. And this whole album to me, while not all of it feels like quote unquote fresh in the sense of, oh my gosh, this is something so new, Earl's never done this before, there is a great, like, I think it balances the familiarity of the past couple albums that you loved with some new ideas, thoughts, and directions from Earl in a post, I almost said post-pandemic world, but that isn't the case yet. But just
more will ever be, by the way.
Yeah, and I would say a new era of Earl, because he seems, at least to me, and I don't know the guy obviously at all, but he seems to me that he's in a different headspace that also has some similarities with what we have heard on the past two albums. But obviously you are extremely plugged in. I mean, I've listened to this album a bunch, but I'm sure you have many thoughts on all the tracks. I read your review; it was excellent, by the way. So
thanks. I mean, I want to work on it some more, but I mean, that was mainly me getting down notes for the show, and more or less. I didn't even publish it yet. I want to probably publish it after the show goes live. But my two big takeaways on this were that I was thinking about it in the context of Earl's greater work, and that's probably where I'm going to end up landing at the very end, is asking where it lands with that. But in terms of how I was thinking about how Earl makes albums, and I think that every Earl album, in a way, is a collaboration with who his immediate circle is at that point. The Earl EP was like is his biggest shock value-y thing, and you could say that's his Odd Future period, but I think that's more just him directly with Tyler, because that's his most, like, character. Like, he's creating this, like, he's a teenager, but he's like sketching himself as this outsized character. It's like the pro wrestling idea of the best pro wrestling characters are yourself, but amplified to 10. Like, the reason The Rock works is it's like Dwayne Johnson, the guy, but he's just amplifying himself into this larger than life character. So Earl is like this, teenager that wants to shock you, but he amplifies. Like, I mean, we talked about the early EP. It's like neither of our favorite work of his. We don't really come back to it. The technical craftsmanship is there, but based on the approach he takes on it, it's just like, it's not something that really has lasting power for, I think, either of us, as we covered that. But that's part of the whole package. It's like, it's not supposed to make some 35-year-old dad comfortable. Like, I'd be a weird dad if I was still into the early EP is my favorite thing. But then you have the Odd Future project, which is like Doris. That's more like Tyler's there. Tyler's influence is there. He's on 2 tracks, but I think it's more about, like, you have Vince coming into the fold, Domo. Like, I think that's more of him taking the group influence and synthesizing that into making, like, his debut album, quote unquote, but it's like taking all of his friends along with him. It's not just so much of like a Tyler art student-y influenced project. So, and it's also his most, like, project that I'd say is a collection of songs more than anything than a cohesive statement. Then I Don't Like Shit, I think, is part more, it's like Vince's influence on it, and part like Rat King, Wiki, and the production. I've been trying, I think the production's probably more of the Rat King influence, I'd say, than anything. Sporting Life, that type of sound, going for the cold remove. And I think in a lot of ways, considering what I'll get to when I talk about the themes of it, the pandemic side theme, I think this has a lot of parallels to Sick in terms of like isolation, alienation, but it's a lot more of a mature approach. Like I think he's covering similar emotional spaces from a more mature headspace, and I think there's a lot more. He's using wordplay in the same ways, but he has a lot more of like. It's just more mature, I would say. Like he expresses himself through word puzzles on both, but you have something like. What was the single? I would say that like something like Huey is just he's very more plain spoken than something like God Laughs on here, where they're both songs about like talking about his family, talking about loss. But God Laughs, he's able to say things in like a more literate, abstract way, whereas on Huey, it's like I spent the day drinking and missing my grandmother, and like beat up like it stole from me. Like he's still like in that dark. Like it's still that teenager thing where it's like I'm going to express basic emotions right in front of your face, and it's also the Doris aspect of like I'm going to hit you with clever ass punchlines. Now the punchlines run like 3 deeper, and then Solace is its own thing. Solace is an extension. I don't like shit sonically. I don't know where I'd place it in terms of like the whole collaborator. It kind of screws my whole collaborator theory, but he always said that Solace was just for his mother anyway. It's like too personal a project. I'm willing to see Solace as like outside. Some people put it on the end of I don't like shit as a bonus track. I think it's its own separate thing and should be viewed separately. Also, it ruins my theory, so I'm just going to view it separately because otherwise I'm going to fucking cheat. Some rap songs is clearly I call it the Stones Throw album, but it's also like definitely when he starts hanging around with the whole New York scene, Standing on the Corner, Mike, all of that. That's clearly those are the collaborators that influence that. And here, it's about. I'd say it's about 1/3 of those guys still, because you have tracks like Fire in the Hole, and Fire in the Hole I'd say is main parts of Lie too. I would say instrumentally, Lie also has that smooth, jazzy, Standing on the Corner-ish type feel to it.
I thought that was the one that evoked. I thought that Lie and Fire in the Hole evoked the last record the most. Some rap songs, sorry, the most, and that was what instantly, even the little like talking shit he's doing on Live, where he's like, yeah, like that shit reminded me of On the Way with the Standing on the Corner song, where he's like, yo.
Yeah, that definitely. He has a lot of little ad lib moments like that on here too, like at the end of Tabla Rasa, where like, oh, sleep, man, like they're all so cool. Yeah, like that's that. Like I hear a lot of the some rap songs influence on the vocal mixing here, just in general. Like I think that's just part of his maturity as a producer. Although like that's more in like the editing process afterwards. Since he didn't produce a single beat on here, it's all Alchemist and Black Noise. And was it just those two? I tried to have a no genius policy on this. When we get to the track by track, there are 2 things I'm going to break it for. But I tried to have a no genius policy on this one because fuck genius, and I think they get Earl's lyrics wrong a lot of the time.
I think the interlude was produced by someone else, but I think that's it.
I would have swore that was Black Noise, but if it sounded like kind of sounded like another Bruiser guy, like maybe Rafi or something, or Skywalker. I could be wrong, but it definitely sounded like sound. But just to wrap up my rambling thesis here. Feet of Clay. I originally had the idea that it was like, if you read my review, which is super rambling, it's like a synthesis of all Earl's styles throughout his career. In a way it is, but I think that's his Mock Hami album. He did a lot of work with Mock on like doing beats for him. Like he on the Spook, he's the only one who does the beats aside from Knowledge, and he's done a lot of stray beats for him, including a great one called Nothing But Net, which is Mock and Droog. Bailey Pocket Knife, Mock and Fahim. So he was clued into Mock before a lot of people. Some might even call him a Mock Hami expert. And
got to be careful about what we say.
I think that's one time I think I can actually throw that around and not get in trouble. I'd say that Earl probably knows more about Mock Hami than most, and earlier than most. No, God. Okay, when you get to the Esquire episode, which I'm sure if you listening in order, you have already heard this. When I talk about his sex album, I make so many fucking unintentional puns that I'm like, I have to stop myself like 5 times in a row. Like, so when I say something like earlier than most, I'm just not even trying to do this anymore. My brain is just like, it won't air, but this episode was delayed because my brain has such holes in it because I nearly burnt my fucking house down. So, shout out to the DuPont Trap House.
Yes, a sieve, truly.
Yeah. So Feet of Clay, I think, is his mock album. Like the structures are getting weirder. I previously said Vision was the weirdest structure in my review, is the weirdest structure of any, or most ambitious structure of any Earl song. I would actually say the most ambitious structures, I mean, Solace, first of all, if you consider Solace one track, Solace is the most ambitious structure. Again, Solace shows up, screws up my fucking rambling thesis. But this one does too, because the mock song on here is also completely freeform structure. And then there's East. No Earl song pisses people off like East. And that's a total mock move to do that too. And I like to say that East didn't bother me at all, but I listened to weird shit. Earl knew what he was doing when he ran with East as the first, second track on there, the track lengths, everything. It's that whole mock idea. Although Earl's always made economical projects, and in that great comment box, one of the first comments before the album even came out was somebody bitching that Earl owes us more music. It's like, this is going to be 24 minutes. What? And then they added up the amount of all the music Earl has given us and said it was less than, it was either 3 minutes more or 3 minutes less than Certified Lover Boy.
Mm-hmm.
And that was supposed to be the argument. It's like, since he's given us so little music, how dare he give us scraps? I mean, if that's the case, you can go listen to fucking Certified Lover Boy.
I was gonna say that should be long enough for you to listen to.
I mean, you can eat I was gonna make something about, you can eat something Drake would appreciate. You can eat a Michelin star meal.
You can rummage for garbage.
Right, yeah. You can eat a Michelin star meal, or you can get a fucking dog food bag size of Malto meal and fucking what would you rather have? So I don't know, that one got away from me. So this one I would say is 1/3. Again, every Earl album I'd say is him taking from his immediate circle. Not to say that he's biting or anything. I don't think this is a J. Cole, Drake, speaking of style, swag Dracula situation. I think he's just a natural collaborator. And I think that you get, he makes reference to that on 2010, where he's talking about trying to make a millionaire out of slumdogs. The first line, I'm going to need a bigger bag for the cohort. He wants to bring his friends along.
Crazy start to that song, by the way. Absolutely.
Okay, so we might as well just jump into the track by track. Yeah. And I'll get into my thesis about the second thing I was going to talk about, the themes, once we get to track 3, I guess, because that's where it really comes in. But yeah, so Old Friend, Alchemist Beat. I said in the chat, I might as well just 10 this right now. I might as well just fucking 10 this album right now. Best album of 2020. Fucking just remarkable.
Only 2 years too that we're adding to. This is the 10th one.
It's officially replaced Brass as the new best album of 2020. I knew immediately from the way he's rapping on this, over this instrumental, one of my just super ethereal, the way he flows over this, because the singles, I thought the singles had a really good reception, but I guess they didn't. Based on that comment box again, based on people's trash ass takes, and the singles were 3 different sounds with 3 different flows, and here's a 4th one. And I asked after Titanic, is he just going to rap a different way on every song? And the answer is pretty much. And so basically comes into it, the title, Sick. You would think that it's the double meaning there is that, he raps sick, but obviously COVID, everyone's sick. And already you get good, classic Earl double meanings here, talking about crossing the picket line, striking to get avoiding the virus, obviously referring to quarantine. But again, I think I have another theory on that too, but it's just right out the gate, really sharp wordplay over a very difficult beat, but it's at the same time, even though the lyrical content is very alienated and dense in a lot of ways, the sound itself somehow still feels warm, and the way he ends it on that note of glad we still friends, and then the way it fades out right into that. The transitions on this are so good. I will not say every track really flow into each other is just butter smooth. And that one hit me so hard. And all of the singles work better in context because of it. Because I already loved 2010, but it works so much better in this context.
Yeah, no question. It's you could, obviously there are clear differentiators, but it almost flows like one long song from track to track, especially in the beginning, I think. Even though they don't necessarily sound like each other. So I might be not making my correct point here, but I feel from Old Friend down to Lie, everything is so smooth. It's all like a very easy kind of flow, run right into each other vibe. So yeah, I mean those 6 songs I've played over and over again. I mean, this whole album's outstanding, but those 6 songs specifically, like I can't get enough of that opening run, because every time I hear it, a new line or a new part of the song just makes, you know when you do like the scrunched up face.
Yeah.
Like when you hear a great like bar or a great hook, or just the entire song. Yeah, that's just me during the duration of like my first listen to this was like in the car, and I was driving, somewhere long distance, and I just replayed it twice because I just couldn't get enough of like that first opening run. I mean,
yeah, no, I replayed Old Friend. Yeah. Like, I still get stuck on it, and I'll like loop it around because I made a disc for the car where it was this album fit just into 80 minutes, the Black Noise album Oblivion, which I'd really like to recommend, by the way. I had a whole thing where I was like, that was a direct lead into this, and it isn't like instrumentally to, I guess, some of the harder stuff. You can see where Black Noise was going with it, but really no more than a lot of the other Bruiser stuff, and you should really check all of that out. But where I think that would be, like, it's a super slept on album, and I think it would be more interesting for Earl fans to just hear, like, recommended if you like Earl type rappers like Mike, Live, Live, I don't know how you pronounce that. Zaloopers again shows up. Hard as fuck Danny Brown verse on there. Like, I mean, the Danny and Zalooper stuff is like not uncommon, but then you get all of like the Mavi type guys, even though I don't think Mavi himself is on there, Pink Sifu, over much harder production than you normally hear them on. And I think that is kind of like a stalking horse for what, and Earl's of course on there. And the imagery he uses on that is some of the sort of animal imagery that he would revisit and call back to on this album too. So I think he was kind of doing a dry run for some of the themes he's going to touch on, some of the wordplay that he would use later on. So, I mean, clearly he liked working with Black Noise. Like, I think that was, I want to say that was their first, their first collaboration was the other album I had on the mix was Zalooper's Dynamite.
Yeah.
And that actually has less of a connection to it. I was going to try and thread all 3 together. That's just a really good ass album, but it's more of Noise there is making what sounds a little more like an older Danny Brown album, like Hot Soup, the hybrid style Danny album. And it's the most Danny-ish Zaloopers album, I would say. Like, it's like a mix of stand-up comedy with more personal, introspective street shit. And that's, pretty much old Danny Brown. So not necessarily OLD Danny Brown, but like his older projects. So so if you like that sort of stuff, I would recommend that for Zaloopers, but I don't think that it necessarily predicts this so much, except for me, the fact that it was the first time Earl worked with Black Noise on the track Easter Sunday, which is a very good song, which was definitely, but it was from that period where Earl was more in that Mahakami headspace of I'm going to give you as little as possible, as dense as possible of place to make you really work for it. Like, he has a whole 16 bars in there, and I think it's like 35 seconds long. It's really impressive, but he really, again, it's like those old Mach projects, which Earl produced on, where he like mixes the vocals like trash, so you have to listen to it really hard. And it's rewarding, but I can see where it would just kind of irritate some people. So yeah, I would just say that. The scrunch face thing. Yeah. So really off topic there. It's like, so yeah, the amount of scrunch face lines on 2010, like Trying to Make a Millionaire with Slum Dogs. That's one of them. On the title track, when that hit me, like that was not one of my first favorites, but on like the second or third listen, I really started gravitating towards it because of its flow on that. And then once the flow starts sinking in, the amount of like lines on there, the last line, "That's expensive shit," like my Uncle Fela said, like that was catchy as fuck. And
that's fire.
That is super fire, and that's where I think that the album's themes really come out. That the sickness he's talking about, like, yes, there's reference to COVID. Obviously, he's talking about the world, but I think he's talking about the theme that he's talked about going as far back as definitely Doris, and depending on how you want to read into it, maybe even the self-titled EP. He's talking about his own wrestling with his own addictions, and that's the sickness. And then it becomes much more clear, I think, on the next track, because he talks about and he threads it together with the COVID, with COVID hell world, pandemic hell world. When he's talking, I mean, I don't want to give the title track short shrift either, because I wanted to skip to Vision, but I think Vision and Tabula Rasa together are deliberately placed with the features in the middle because they're the heart of the album, they're the key of the album. And so we're just going to address the fucking line on vision, and then work our way backwards. So the line that had everybody in the comment box, and I'm sure all over Twitter, is that Earl says, "Fuck out my face with syringes." And everybody wants to say that he's saying, it's like he's being Jay Electronic on the IDK album. I don't roll with Dr. Fauci. I'm with Dr. Set. All this shit. No, I don't get that at all, because if you think of the previous line, he's talking about how can you do that? How can you do this to people with the rent moratorium ending and rent on the extendo?
Yeah.
And so that's bringing it into COVID. And then he says, no, but then fuck out my face with syringe, I think, is a lot more bringing it back to the previous track. Everything he says on Sick, pleasure by the gram, smoking the gas, got to siphon it in. This is the first Earl album, I think, where there's no positive references to him getting high. Other people will make references to getting high, and I think there's supposed to be different aspects of his conscience. I think Zalooper's is supposed to be the devil on his shoulder in visions. I think Woods is supposed to be his friend giving him advice, or somebody giving an outside perspective that he's listening to on Tabula Rasa. Because Woods is telling a story that ends with him taking this woman home. At least this is my interpretation of what happens on Woods' part of Tabula Rasa. Is he just sneaks into this hood party or whatever with a Pepsi that he's got booze in, and he kind of bullshits his way through it, and he ends the night just thinking about stuff, smoking by himself. And it's I feel like it's him, and I get the impression of him kind of talking to Earl. So he's makes reference to smoking, but Earl's not making positive references to getting high on this album. So I think that when he makes reference to smoking gas on Sick, that's not positive. And then so when you take that context in on the previous track, and then the way Zalooper's kind of sounds more foreboding, and when he says something he sounds desperate. The Zalooper's part sounds desperate to me. He's begging for someone to get high for me, bringing someone to understand him, with that weird ass flow where he the punchline comes before the setup almost. If you understand what I'm saying, someone to blasphemy. Desert Eagle. Speaking of scrunch bass lines, by the way, that I was singing to myself.
And they repeat it a few times where they're talking about I want someone to
ask for me. Yeah, it's these are all these needs in his head, and then Earl's kind of coming back. He's kind of fighting. I'd say the temptation of darkness in his thoughts, and the structure is interesting to me too, because I commented on the structure being ambitious. It kind of feels like a bit of an echo of the structure of DNA, which I think is one of his most personal songs, the one where, Knock takes acid and learns his brother dies right before he records the verse. And so that's also a two-person back and forth, intensely personal dialogue based around a drug experience. But this feels a lot more swirling, and DNA's more DNA's Earl angrily reflecting on what got him here, but that was from a place where he was not as settled with his family. Obviously, all the references to his family are positive on this album, and all the references to drugs seem negative. And there's also references to his friends in his hometown that I think you can read a lot into, and we'll get to that more on other tracks. So I think there's a whole lot going on around that syringe line that's not just him he's not Lloyd Banks making fucking anti-vax jokes. And then the one line that got me after that was "Ain't no parade in the tent," and then I was like, okay, so maybe it is anti-vax, right? Ain't no parade in the tent, it's a clinic tent. No, that's bringing it back to that's COVID wordplay. No parade in the tent. It's a tent city because you're homeless, because you got kicked out.
Yeah.
That's no parade in the tent. So I think that he's threading these two together. He gets your attention by making you think it's about COVID, to unlock that it's actually more of a personal narrative. I might be full of shit, but listening to this album 100 fucking times, it seemed more clear to me on each listen that at the very least, that's a theme he's alluding to, if not the primary theme. And I've talked 15 fucking minutes. You should talk.
No, that's okay. I appreciate your the perspective, because, and it's always good to hear. I always say this all the time on the podcast, but it's always good to hear from people who are really, really into records, because when that passion comes out, that's part of what makes the shit great. So yeah. Great stuff. Some of that stuff I hadn't even considered. So that's your takes are very valuable, especially when it comes to an Earl album. Yeah. Whenever I listen to Earl, the first few listens, it's always just everything sonically. I'm just the bars and the concepts are hovering in the background for me. And I just couldn't get over all the beats on this fucking album. Like the 2010 beat,
the sick beat,
like the 2010 beat, the sick beat. Wait, is "Sick" the song where at the end, it's the little interlude and the woman's voice is talking about like,
no, I think
she's like in a conversation about like what you should tell your kids and like tell them black is beautiful and like the stuff about identity.
That's the end of Visions, because Visions goes into the Elucid verse where he's like, it's like something about like, I'm not as numb as I thought, or on second thought, I'm not as numb as I thought, which makes me again think that song is like about affirmations. It's like he's getting a pep talk from Elucid, he's getting life experience from Woods, and then his verse on there is him trying to like big himself up, push through this darkness. Like Visions is him like hitting the pit of darkness. And then he's trying to talk himself out of it. And then you could argue Lie is where he's like giving in. Because Lie to me sounds like the sound of somebody getting high. And I don't know if Lie's involved in I'm going to probably sound like a fucking square when I talk about this shit. I think Lie's involved in the process of making opium or some shit. I don't know. But that song has like the smokiest, most narcotic. That and Sick, I think, are sister songs instrumentally. They both have like the smokiest, most narcotic instrumentals and flows. So.
Mm-hmm.
But
I can see that.
But on Sick, he sounds sick. He sounds exhausted. Like Sick is the closest he sounds to like shout out to Diction, Zombie Hop Earl. And shout out to Diction. That's legit shout out to Diction because he said that he liked Earl's rapping on this album. It was the instrumentals he had a problem with. Honestly, I didn't expect him to like either. I expected him to hate everything. So, but that's a testament to Earl's rapping on this. And I think that it's a good mix of every stuff. Like, I mean, I made that comment about how if you liked earlier stuff from Earl, that would be the one time I could see really not being into this album. And I'm not just referring to if you liked him making rape punchlines or whatever. I think he's a fundamentally different rapper than he was on Doris. Like, not just the early EP, but like the way he structures his verses, the way he raps and what he raps about. He's a more mature person and he's more skilled at the way he raps. But I think that this is a good mix of like, I don't like shit emotional directness and some rap songs like Mad Villainy style abstraction and more alert flows. Like, because there's stuff on and flows you've never heard. A few flows, like you said, that feel fresh from Earl. Like even 2010 felt fresh from Earl. And some of the stuff that people were obsessed with calling trap that you'll hear on the second half, even though I maintain there's only one trap song. I guess Titanic is up to argument, but
yeah, I'm not. I found that whole thing pretty tiresome. Like in that whole discussion around it, pretty tiresome. So I'm not a fan of that talk. I saw people like melting down and like just secondhand. Someone posted a screenshot of like some Fantano live stream thing, which was like the chat disagreeing about. First of all, never catch me in a Fantano live stream chat. Second of all, I just those type of people just debating about like what is actually like trap versus what's not. It's like you guys are all just leave, like please. So yeah, I'm not huge into that debate side of it. I think that there are modern elements of from a beat standpoint that people would define under the trap umbrella on Titanic. But I don't think that song or any song on here is a quote unquote trap song, considering what we know about how trap music is defined. But I mean, no one came to this podcast for my white ass to be talking about what defines trap or not. So I just think the whole discussion is tiresome and I don't like it.
That is, I mean, there's been a lot of tiresome discussions around this album. Honestly, I find that even more tiresome than the vaccine discussion. Like, I never want to hear anything music on ROIM or anywhere elsewhere. And that just shows how under-listened to, like, Bruiser Brigade is, because it's very clearly a Pete, with the exception of the obvious stuff that references back to Earl's work with Arm & Hammer and Earl's work with Standing on the Corner, which is the three tracks we talked about. Like, well, we're talking about more because they're all in the second half. This is pretty clearly in line with Rafi, Skywalker, the Bruiser Brigade production, which is trap. Yes, it has trap elements, but also has elements of like Detroit techno and D&B and all types of shit. Like, it's a polyglot production style. So that's about it. I think it's about as simple as just saying like SRS is jazz rap almost. Like, you're really making an oversimplification of something that's a lot more nuanced. And it's just to make a dumb argument about Earl not rapping over stuff you like immediately, I guess.
Yeah, I don't, and that's like a really frustrating thing to me, because even as myself, who like hasn't listened to a ton of Bruiser Brigade stuff outside of Bruiser Wolf and like so Zaloopers and the production, but I can tell that it's immediately, and also you can just tell by the collaborators, like it's influenced by that sort of thing. You don't need like a map to see what Earl, who Earl was hanging out with, what he was listening to, what he was influenced by. You saw the same thing with SRS, so it really doesn't take a lot of brain power, and yet people still
honestly
can't summon the brain power.
With the rollout with SRS, with some rap songs, SRS, whatever too. The second single was The Mint with Navy Blue. The second single here is Tabula Rasa with Armin. That doesn't really prove the point with the Bruiser Brigade thing, but it's like the collaborators point. But again, I just shot myself in the foot a little bit. But it's like that would have made a lot more sense with the Zaloopers thing. But he led with the Black Noise production in the same way he led with the Ade Hakim on Nowhere to Go. And then Titanic, I think, is a pretty emblematic Black Noise production of where he's going on it. Like, I think that sonically, he's not trying to hide his influences or his collaborators. And I don't think it's as simple as just Earl made a trap album. And trap is a meaningless term. Like, the way trap is being used in these discussions is a meaningless term. Anyway, so back to
no question.
I think we honestly lost it at Sick, because then I just wanted to jump to my whole thesis point about visions. But yeah, Sick and Lie were the two that least grabbed me on first listen, that I gravitate almost, like, I won't say, like, I don't even think I have a favorite song, because I listen to, like, people who are complaining about the length are missing the fucking point, because that just makes it more replayable to me. Because I don't have a favorite song, because I listen to it pretty much as one whole chunk. But I really gravitate way more towards Sick on repeat listens than I did on the first. Ditto with Lie, and I think they're sister songs. And the way it goes into Visions is incredible. And yeah, that's all I really had to say on that part.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Lie was probably like one of my the like I just keep talking about the first 6 songs, but like there are moments in each of the first 6 songs that are just like perfect music, and it's tough to
well, you know what line?
It's tough to find. It's tough to find fault. Like Tabula Rasa is an incredible fucking song. I think you mentioned it, but it was just like, yeah, it's basically just like 3 perfect verses with, like, I mean, I'm implementing this in here, but to me, it's like a remarkably familiar, cozy beat. And I love that. Like, I love how you can just kind of like sink into the song and listen to all 3 of these incredible artists like rap their ass off, but while not feeling like someone's like rapping at you. You know what I mean? I find that very. I find that very very appealing in the sense that like you can just sit there and every once in a while you'll be like, oh, that bar I picked up on that, oh, that and like it's not preaching to you like it's not doing like I'm gonna deride this person again, but it's not like a J. Cole or like a early 2010s like Lupe Fiasco type beat. You know what I mean? Where you're getting appreciated. It's just like, oh, I'm just gonna sit back and listen to these incredibly talented artists rap, and then they're not telling you necessarily that like, oh yeah, my verse has meaning. But then if you listen to it for more than like 2 seconds, you're like, oh yeah.
Yeah, it's very common. I think the reason I think of it
doesn't. What I meant to say, I'm sorry, I cut you off. My overarching point was, because I know I just kind of rambled and didn't make much sense. My overarching point was a song like that, and any Earl song that has like, quote unquote, like the hard bars that, heads are looking to listen to. It doesn't sacrifice his musicality for that. That's my biggest win with an album like this. The musicality on this album is fucking awesome. So like, I love that most of all about it.
Yeah, there's so much, like, there's just as many, like, nuances to the music as there is to the writing. I like the thing you said about the hard bars part, because, or, like, just picking up on bars, like, on your, like, umpteenth listen, because I listened to that song so much from, like, even when it was a single before it came out. I think I probably listened to that more than the other 2, even though it came out after 2010. I listened to 2010 a bunch. I'm going to listen to the Arm & Hammer song the most, just because I love them as artists, and I can't get enough of dissecting their lyrics. And I think both their verses bring something all 3 verses bring something completely different to the song, while being completely compatible with each other. I think that all their work together is of like the same a piece with each other. Like you have Ramsey's 2 on Shrines, which I think set the template, and then you had Falling Out the Sky is kind of like a sequel to that. They all have these same like warm, organic feeling instrumentals, which is obviously the palette that Arm & Hammer is working with on Shrines. They're not on it, but it's also kind of prevalent on Soon Ja Do with Earl and Mock on Mock's Hard Lemonade. And I think this one, the way they plays the vocal sample in the background, speaking of the musicality, kind of reminds me of, I don't know if this is intentional or not, the way the intro on some rap songs, the dreams,
yes,
so much.
Oh, that's a good.
Like the call and response that Earl does with that. But I think that might be an intentional echo of it, that he's kind of like, in Shattered Dreams, he's like, really morose and downcast, and here he's trying to big himself up with affirmations. So instead of like talking about his dreams being shattered, he's trying to remind himself he has so much to live for. But he's kind of losing it as he, like, asymptomatic, but I get sick of the delays. That's again like a COVID bar, but it's not a COVID bar. He's using the language of COVID to talk about something different. And again, I'm rambling too. I think we're both so enthusiastic about this album, we just kind of fucking spiel off like this. This is supposed to be a mini episode. Like I was telling Sphinx when I was deciding it, we're the only podcast where our mini episodes are an hour and a half. I don't think we really understand how this works. But no, I want to get this out real quick. It's about like the bars you pick up on 15th listen. I had to write to find balance. I always took that on face value. I had to write, like he had to write to get his head right. What do you do to balance yourself? You write yourself. Like you write, like you steady yourself.
Yeah.
It took me so long to get that. It's such a simple line, but it's such a simple double entendre, but it's so good. And like, I think like every line of his in that verse is at least two different meanings. But again, I mean, I know you're talking about the beat or whatever, not being like some whack ass Lupe Fiasco beat, but this is going to come across as a slight on Lupe, but it's really Lupe Fiasco episode. It's going to be 17 hours long. It's coming soon. And that's going to have the fans really in. That's going to be a fan base that's really good. The mom fans are like nice compared to that. I will never, even our guest knows way more about Lupe than me. I'm not going to call anybody a Lupe Fiasco as expert, because then Lupe will probably get on IG and read through like a transcript of our episode and then like refute it point by point.
Yeah. So, then we're gonna get eviscerated, and then next thing you know, the next like roundtable topic on Dead End Hip Hop will be like, do you think it's okay for white podcasters to talk about it?
With special guest Anthony Fantano, we'll finally get Fantano to talk about it.
Big things ahead with that one.
We should get Y to put a picture of Fantano up and blur it like his bitch ass did the Haram cover. Anyway, but my point is with regards to Lupe is that he has a way of constructing it where he'll have a double entendre with several layers and he lampshades it. He wants you to dig into it as much as possible. He encourages that kind of nerviness with a bar, like Mural. Like Mural is nothing but a song that encourages you to dig into it forever. I don't think anybody's ever unpacked everything about that song. And it's impressive, but it's exhausting. What makes Earl's verses on something like this so impressive is they're casually impressive. They're casually deep. I had to write to find balance. That's just like impressively simple. But the way it works within the context of the verse gives it such resonance.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I couldn't agree more. Earl is such a brilliant mind. And it's casually brilliant. It's not beating you over the head with it, as we've emphasized previously.
That's very important. Like, no thought.
Like Vision.
Don't beat you over the head. Don't rap about money. Earl raps about money on this, by the way, with a great punchline. So I guess we need to chastise for that in the Rough Guide on the intermission track. Like
a song like, I feel like a song like Vision, or even a song like Titanic, could be preachy or unnecessary in the wrong hands. But because the beats are hard as nails on both of those songs, and they're like creative and fresh and interesting and not something that Earl's ever gone over, then you get the then the payoff is all there, because when Vision goes into Tabula Rasa and it sounds more familiar, or when Titanic goes into Fire in the Hole, which clearly to me evokes Riot, it evokes a lot of the back half of SRS, and it makes sense as an outro song. When you get those songs, I think that makes those songs that much more powerful, if you get what I'm kind of saying. Because you're just coming off as, holy shit, that's like, we haven't heard Earl do that before. But then you get and then Earl kind of reminds you why you love the last album so much too. So
yeah, I think that's part of what makes Titanic.
And it's not a retread. It's not a retread. I want to emphasize that. Like, it's not a retread. It's all original and new, but he's still giving you glimpses of like, oh yeah, now I want to go back to some rap songs and listen to the whole shit all the way through, because it's a fucking classic.
Well, I think Fire in the Hole is directly a flow he's used before, and I'm sure that's on purpose. I've been trying to place it, and it's probably off some rap songs, but I can't place which track. And deliberate placement, it's interesting. You talk about how amazing the opening first 6 are. I didn't really like Lie and Sick were the two that didn't hit me at first, but I appreciated Sick anyway as part of the first sequence. But like, I gravitated toward the opening run. I remember Wyatt in the chat was like, the closing run's amazing. I think that's how you can tell this album really hits, is people are going to pick different, different favorite songs, obviously, and also different parts of the album that work for them the best. And sequence-wise, I think everybody can have a different interpretation of it. I see it as kind of a 3-act sequence thing where it starts off optimistic, ends optimistic, and has darkness in the middle. Like, I see optimistic. I see optimism in the beginning, like weary optimism, but optimism in the beginning, optimism in the end, and with the more alert rapping to kind of signify that. And then it gets dark around Sick and like, for obviously the drug narrative that I was talking about, which is also a parallel to, in the same sort of like, well, no, not really. I'm going to abandon that one. I was going to compare it to another album that doesn't really work, but I think, and also a sort of aspirational thing about how we all hope to make it through this pandemic is a more universal thing. So there's a personal narrative at work, at least if you buy my theory, and also a universal narrative talking about COVID. So, but in terms of the way the sequencing absolutely works, I like what you said, is because you have something like the first 5 tracks, I think, are, Earl rapping over great production in a way that's not necessarily, it still feels fresh because he's doing it so well. And the production is, again, like top of the line, but not super. Visions and Sick are a little more ambitious, and it doesn't sound necessarily like some rap songs, but it doesn't feel super out of his wheelhouse. But the second half, like, the intermission is the most overtly trap thing, is the one trap song. It's a relief valve is the way I put it in my review. I think that it's deliberately placed in between, like, the most narcotically slow song in line, the most experimental song in God Laughs. And then in between those two, after that, then you have, again, another aggressive song, which goes into the most some rap songs like thing on the finale, which has that lovely piano outro, which, as you said, directly invokes Riot, which I think is ultimately a statement on his family again. By even invoking Riot, I think he wanted people to think about that song and then think about familial themes too. So yeah. So I think that's the whole point about, like, he does something new. He deliberately structures the album to surprise you with what he's doing, and sonically, like on a sonic level alone, even before getting to the lyrics, I think this is just as impressive as most things he's ever done. I think some rap songs has the benefit of me having lived with it longer. I think this could equal it with time, but sonic, and that's to say it's not as sonically impressive as some rap songs is no slight, because that's a towering achievement. But I think it's his second most sonically impressive, and lyrically, I think it explores. It's his most mature lyrically, and I'm still finding new nuances in it every time I listen to it. So,
I can. I think ending with the God Laughs grew on me a lot, even as the most recent listen I did like an hour before we recorded this. Like, that one was definitely things that I picked up on more. I like the little noise, like the little voices in the background. I think that amplifies with like the ad-libs on Titanic, and then Fire in the Hole is like such a gorgeous song. And so, I think Wyatt does have a point. Maybe in a week I'll be saying that the closing like 3 songs are the 3 best songs on here, but like, I've just been spinning the first 6 on repeat, and obviously that's to no slight of. I think the only song that like I don't really like have any strong feelings about is the intermission, but everything else on here is excellent, and it wouldn't surprise me if this album continues to rise and I feel the same way about it that I do as I don't like shit, because right now I do have it technically like on a numerical level, rank lower than that, but it's been out for like 5 days, so I'm sure that will change very soon. I have nothing but great things to say about this. Like, I don't really think there's a dip. I think that at its best, it's some of the best that he's ever sounded in, and some of the best features that he's been able to coax out of people, and that includes like Vince Staples on I Don't Like Shit, and that includes all the little features that chipped in, like Navy on the Mint and things like that. So like those are the Loopers contributions, the Arm & Hammer. I mean, of course, the Arm & Hammer contributions. Like this album didn't miss. He didn't miss. The features didn't miss. The production damn sure didn't miss. I look forward to playing this all year.
Yeah, I mean, just for the sake of brevity, I will wrap it. I was just wrap it up by asking where you think it ranks overall, but I think you pretty much hit that, at least personally. I would say that I actually don't want to answer that because every Earl album has gone up in estimation with the exception of the EP over time. Like, yep. I don't like shit at a 10. I originally had it at an 8. I think that this has a lot of interesting parallels to that, but I think the most interesting to me is just it reflects how much he's grown as an artist and a person, because I think he's doing a lot of the same themes. But like I Don't Like Shit was basically, if I recall the story behind that, the isolation came from a skateboarding accident and thinking your friends are phony, and like the stories on that, they're still like, retreating into drug use and realizing it's a problem and kind of reaching a point in your transition from adolescence to adulthood where you're starting to see like who your true friends are. And he kind of establishes this through using the features there, like sparingly but intelligently for the themes he's trying. Like the features on that are sparing and amazing too. Like the wiki feature, Vince at the end, and especially the knock feature, which I talked about earlier. But then he's touching on the same, like, that's all what left him feeling isolated there back then. Now he's touching on it again when it's like his drug problem, like his retreat into drugs has become a full-on problem that, if I'm reading the lyrics correctly, has taken over his life. He's no longer as antagonistic, oppositionally defiant, whatever, towards his family. He can have a much more nuanced perspective on them, historical perspective on them, and those relationships feel like they're a lot more thoroughly explored than just being bitter at your friends because they don't talk like you when you were having meaningless sex at the Odd Future group house or whatever he's talking about. And I feel like I'm being dismissive of the themes on I Don't Like Shit, and I'm not, because I think he does a great job with those themes and raps about them incredibly compellingly there, but they feel simple compared to the evolution that you've seen through some rap songs and even parts of Feet of Clay, although I think Feet of Clay is more of just like a writing exercise about just being a good rapper than, like, thematically, I think you could skip Feet of Clay. I mean, he touches on some of the themes for sure, but overall, I think that in the main album narrative, you can skip from some rap songs to here to see the point that I'm trying to make. So, but yeah,
he's
just led to us rambling for an hour about how fucking great it is. I think that it's both a testament to Earl's artistic evolution and something that I can't believe this got. I mean, I think it's a testament to our restraint that we didn't spend most of this episode just bitching about how bad the reaction to it has been. Because I think that I started off with that, but I think that's all that really needs to be said, is that this is not for an album that comments on contemporary issues. This is not an album that's going to that lends itself to the hot take economy. I think this is like, no, it'll get remembered at some, like, certainly when you come around this time next year and listen to the year end episode, we'll be remembering it. I'm sure I will, at least. But I think 5 years down the line, when Earl's whole discography, his legacy is considered, this one's going to be thought of as a lot more than just some uninspired COVID album. So this is... I
sure as hell hope so. I'll tell you that much. Like,
I don't see how you can just listen to the beginning of this and not catch some fucking feelings. I don't know. You're looking for something out of hip-hop or different than I am, and perhaps you should consult the RYM Rough Guide for some guidance on that. So I'll leave you with that. All right, so Earl's Sick, you should probably listen to it. And I forgot to do our introduction. I was so focused on doing an intro, I forgot to do the intro. This was Patrique on RYM, Patrick McGovern, Caleb, OptimalAudio on RYM. This was Living Off Borrowed Time. Our intro music is the Borrowed Time Billy Woods instrumental by Yoon Classic, and our outro music, as always, is Stagnated Case by Can Kick. See you next time.
It ain't gonna never stop. 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 Salam.
Time will tell. Time is yet to be conquered by man. But when the time is right, perhaps the greatest revelation of all time will dawn upon us.